The gunshot echoed across the vast Wyoming prairie, drawing Nathan Reed's attention from the fence post he'd been hammering. His weathered hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip as he scanned the horizon, squinting against the setting sun of 1878. That's when he saw her, a woman on horseback, bent low over the saddle, riding hard toward his ranch with 3 men in pursuit. Nathan swung onto his horse without hesitation, kicking the animal into a gallop to intercept the chase. As he drew closer, he could see blood staining the woman's dress, her dark hair wild in the wind. Her pursuers, rough-looking men with bandanas covering their faces, were gaining ground. "Get down!" Nathan shouted as he approached, raising his rifle and firing a warning shot over the men's heads. The woman's horse stumbled, nearly throwing her, but she managed to stay mounted and change course toward him. The pursuing men hesitated, exchanging glances before the leader raised his hand. "This ain't your business, cowboy. That woman's a thief and a murderer." Nathan positioned himself between the woman and her pursuers. "She's on my land now, that makes it my business." His voice was calm but left no room for argument. "You boys turn around and ride out, or I'll have to consider you trespassers." For a tense moment, the 3 men seemed to consider their options. Nathan kept his rifle steady, ready to fire if needed. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. "You'll regret taking her in. That woman's nothing but trouble." They wheeled their horses around and rode off, casting dark glances over their shoulders. Nathan turned to the woman, who had slumped forward in her saddle. Her face was pale beneath a layer of dust, and blood trickled from a wound on her arm. Her green eyes met his, wary but defiant. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper before she slid from her saddle in a faint. Nathan caught her before she hit the ground. Up close, he could see she was beautiful despite her disheveled state, mid-20s perhaps, with high cheekbones and full lips now cracked from dehydration. He lifted her onto his horse and led both animals back toward his ranch house, wondering what kind of trouble he'd just invited into his life. By the time they reached the modest 2-story house that served as the heart of the Broken Arrow Ranch, the woman had regained consciousness but remained weak. Nathan helped her inside and seated her at his kitchen table. "Name's Nathan Reed," he said, pouring water into a cup. "And you are?" She hesitated, eyeing him cautiously before answering. Sophia Wilson." "Well, Miss Wilson wanted to tell me why those men were so intent on catching you." Sophia sipped the water, her hands trembling slightly. "They think I stole from them." "Did you?" Her eyes flashed. "No." "But they won't believe that. They need someone to blame, and I'm convenient." Nathan dampened a cloth and handed it to her for her wound. "That's not the whole story." "No," she admitted, "but it's all I'm willing to share with a stranger, even one who saved my life." She winced as she dabbed at the bullet graze on her arm. "Let me help with that," Nathan said, taking the cloth from her. He cleaned the wound gently, aware of her watchful gaze. "It's not deep, should heal clean if we keep it from festering." "You're being awfully kind to someone those men called a thief and a murderer." Nathan's mouth quirked up at one corner. "I've learned not to put much stock in what men like that say. Besides, my mother taught me never to turn away someone in need." He wrapped a clean bandage around her arm. "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, if you're feeling better, we'll figure out what to do." Sophia looked around the neat but sparse kitchen. "You live here alone?" "Just me and a couple of ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse. Had a wife once, but she died of fever 5 years back." "I'm sorry." Nathan nodded, the grief an old companion now. "Got a spare room upstairs. Used to be my daughter's, but she's married now, living in Cheyenne." "You're very trusting, Mr. Reed." "Nathan," he corrected. "And I keep my revolver close. Trust only goes so far out here." That brought a small smile to her face. "Fair enough." Nathan showed her to the small bedroom, furnished simply with a bed, chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. "There's a wash basin and some of my daughter's old clothes in the drawer. They might be a bit small, but cleaner than what you're wearing." "Thank you." Sophia stood awkwardly in the center of the room. "I won't be a burden. I can work. I'm good with horses, and I can cook. We'll talk about that tomorrow. For now, get some rest." Nathan turned to leave but paused at the door. Those men, will they come back? Something dark crossed Sophia's face. Probably, men like that don't give up easily. Then we'll be ready. Nathan closed the door quietly, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. The next morning, Nathan woke at dawn as usual. He'd slept lightly, half expecting trouble in the night, but the house had remained quiet. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, surprised to find Sophia already in the kitchen, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove. She'd found his daughter's old blue calico dress, which fit her reasonably well. With her face washed and her dark hair pulled back, she looked transformed and even more beautiful than he'd initially thought. "Hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the stove. "Seemed the least I could do." "Not at all." Nathan poured himself a cup of coffee, noting it was stronger than he usually made it. "How's the arm?" "Better." She rolled up her sleeve to show him the bandage, still clean. "Your daughter's clothes fit well enough. I'll wash my own today." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each sizing up the other in the morning light. Sophia was the first to speak. "I should probably move on today. Those men might be waiting for you to do just that," Nathan interrupted. "Stay a few days, at least until your arm heals proper." Sophia studied him, clearly weighing her options. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Nathan considered his answer carefully. "Out here, folks help each other. It's how we survive." He sipped his coffee. "Besides, I could use the help around the place. My regular cook headed back east last month. Ranch hands are getting tired of my cooking." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "I can cook, and I wasn't lying about being good with horses." "Then it's settled, at least for now." Nathan stood and reached for his hat. "I need to check the herd with my hands. Kitchen's yours if you want it." When Nathan returned for the midday meal, he found his two ranch hands, Emmett and Javier, already seated at the table, expressions of pure bliss on their faces as they devoured plates of stew and fresh biscuits. "Boss," Emmett said between bites, "you need to convince this lady to stay forever." Sophia placed a plate in front of Nathan, looking uncomfortable with the praise but pleased nonetheless. "It's just a simple stew." "Simple," Javier exclaimed. "Señorita, this is the best meal I've had since leaving my mother's house in Mexico." Nathan took a bite and had to agree. The stew was rich and flavorful, the biscuits light and fluffy. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother," Sophia said, sitting down with her own plate. "She ran a boarding house in St. Louis before she died." "St. Louis," Emmett perked up. "That where you're from?" Sophia's expression closed slightly. "Originally, I've moved around a lot the past few years." Nathan noticed her discomfort and changed the subject. "We've got a broken fence line on the north pasture. Emmett, you and Javier get it fixed this afternoon." After the ranch hands left, Sophia began clearing the dishes. "Your men seem nice." "They're good workers," Nathan agreed. "Been with me about 3 years now, and they don't live in town." "Have families." Emmett's saving to buy his own spread someday. "Javier sends most of his pay back to his family in Mexico." Nathan helped her with the dishes, an activity his wife used to tease him about. Few men in these parts would be caught doing women's work, but Nathan had never cared much for such distinctions. "What about you?" Sophia asked, handing him a plate to dry. "How long have you had this ranch?" "Built it from nothing about 15 years ago. Came west after the war with not much more than the horse I rode in on and a dream of open spaces." Nathan hung the dish towel to dry. "My wife, Elizabeth, joined me a year later. We had our daughter, Caroline, the following spring. It must have been hard losing your wife." Nathan nodded, the familiar ache returning. "Nearly gave up on everything. If it hadn't been for Caroline needing me, I might have." Sophia's eyes softened with understanding. "Children give us a reason to keep going when nothing else does." There was something in her voice, a depth of emotion that made Nathan wonder. "You have children?" She turned away, busying herself with wiping down the table. "No, not anymore." The simple phrase held such grief that Nathan didn't press further. Everyone in the West carried ghosts he knew that better than most. In the days that followed, Sophia settled into life at the Broken Arrow Ranch with surprising ease. She took over the cooking and household duties without complaint, and even began helping with the horses, displaying a natural talent that impressed Nathan. He found himself watching her more than he should, admiring the graceful way she moved and the quiet strength she exhibited. Word spread quickly in the small community about the mysterious woman staying at Nathan Reed's ranch. When Nathan rode into the town of Cottonwood Springs for supplies a week after Sophia's arrival, he found himself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. "Heard you've got a woman staying out at your place," Sheriff Tom Miller said as Nathan loaded supplies into his wagon outside the general store. "News travels fast," Nathan replied neutrally. "It does when Ben Hollister and his boys ride through claiming a dark-haired woman shot one of their men and stole $200. The sheriff's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were sharp. Nathan straightened. "Those the men who were chasing her? Sounds like it." "Hollister's crew works for the railroad, clearing land for the new line. Not the most savory bunch, but they haven't caused trouble in my jurisdiction before." Sheriff Miller leaned against the wagon. "This woman got a name, Sophia Wilson." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "She say anything about shooting someone? She says they're blaming her for something she didn't do." Nathan secured the last crate. "That's good enough for me." "Is it?" Sheriff Miller rubbed his chin. "Nathan, I've known you a long time. You're a good man, but sometimes your desire to help folks clouds your judgment. You sure you know what you're taking on with this woman?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "She needed help. I provided it, simple as that." "Nothing's ever that simple, especially not with a woman men like Hollister are hunting." The sheriff pushed away from the wagon. "Just be careful, and if she is in real trouble, you might want to suggest she come talk to me before those men decide to pay your ranch another visit." As Nathan drove the wagon back to the ranch, the sheriff's words weighed on him. He'd been so caught up in Sophia's presence, the way she brightened his home, the sound of her laughter when she played with the barn cats, the quiet conversations they shared in the evenings, that he'd almost forgotten the circumstances of her arrival. He found her in the barn, brushing down his stallion, Thunder. The horse, normally wary of strangers, stood contentedly under her ministrations. "He likes you," Nathan observed, setting down a bag of feed. Sophia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Animals are better judges of character than people sometimes." "Maybe so." Nathan leaned against the stall door. "Ran into the sheriff in town, says those men who were after you are claiming you shot one of their friends and robbed them." The brush stilled in her hand. "Did he come to arrest me?" "No, but he suggested you might want to tell your side of the story before those men decide to pay us another visit." Sophia resumed brushing, her movements more mechanical now. "And what do you think I should do?" "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that it's time you told me the truth, all of it." She was quiet for so long that Nathan thought she might refuse. Finally, she set down the brush and turned to face him. "You've been kind to me, Nathan, kinder than anyone has been in a very long time. You deserve the truth." They walked back to the house together, the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard. In the kitchen, Sophia sat at the table while Nathan built a fire in the stove to ward off the evening chill. "I was married," she began, her voice steady but quiet. "His name was William Wilson. We had a son, James. We lived in Kansas, where William worked for the railroad." Nathan sat across from her, saying nothing, letting her tell the story at her own pace. "William was a good man, but he had a gambling problem. He got in deep with some bad people. When he couldn't pay, they threatened our family." Sophia's hands twisted in her lap. "One night they came to our house. William tried to fight them off. They killed him, and then her voice broke. "They set fire to our house. I managed to get out, but James, he was only 4. Nathan's heart clenched at the raw pain in her voice. "I'm sorry, Sophia." She took a deep breath, composing herself. "The men who did it worked for Benjamin Hollister. He runs security for the railroad company, but his real business is extortion and worse. After I lost everything, I decided to find evidence of what Hollister was doing. I worked as a cleaner at the railroad office, listening, gathering information." "That's dangerous work," Nathan observed quietly. "It was all I had left to live for," Sophia replied. "I managed to find documents showing how Hollister was embezzling from the company and using violence to silence anyone who got in his way. I was going to take the evidence to the territorial marshal." But they caught you, she nodded. One of Hollister's men saw me with the papers. There was a struggle. His gun went off. I didn't shoot him, but he was wounded. I ran, but I lost the documents in the process. They've been hunting me ever since, telling everyone I'm a thief and a murderer. Nathan absorbed her story, looking for any sign of deception, but finding none. The grief and anger in her eyes were too real to be feigned. Why didn't you go to the law? With what proof? Hollister has connections throughout the territory. I wouldn't have made it to trial. Sophia's gaze met his directly. I understand if you want me to leave now. I've brought danger to your door, and that wasn't fair. Nathan considered her words carefully. He'd always prided himself on being a good judge of character, and everything in him said Sophia was telling the truth. More than that, he realized with a start, he didn't want her to leave. In the short time she'd been at the ranch, she'd brought life back to a home that had been merely a place to eat and sleep for too long. You're not going anywhere, he said firmly. Not unless you want to. Relief and something else, gratitude, perhaps flashed across her face. Nathan, you don't understand the risk. These men, they won't stop. Let them come, he interrupted. This is my land. I fought in the war, Sophia. I know how to defend what's mine. The word hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Thank you, she whispered. Later that night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Nathan sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. The moon was full, casting silver light across the ranch yard and making the distant mountains appear closer than they were. The peaceful scene belied the tension coiled inside him. He hadn't told Sophia everything the sheriff had shared. Hollister's men had been asking questions all over the county, offering rewards for information about a dark-haired woman traveling alone. It was only a matter of time before someone connected her to the Broken Arrow Ranch. Nathan had never been one to back down from a fight, but this was different. He wasn't just defending his land now, he was protecting someone who was quickly becoming important to him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The realization both unsettled and invigorated him. In the quiet of the night, with only the crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle for company, Nathan admitted to himself what he'd been avoiding. He was falling for Sophia Wilson. The knowledge should have frightened him after all. He barely knew her, and she had brought danger to his doorstep. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. You're a fool, Nathan Reed, he muttered to himself, but there was no real conviction behind the words. The sound of a floorboard creaking alerted him to Sophia's presence before she spoke. Couldn't sleep. She asked, stepping onto the porch wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. Just keeping watch, he replied, making room for her on the bench beside him. She sat down close enough that he could feel her warmth. You think they'll come tonight? No, but it doesn't hurt to be prepared. They sat in companionable silence for a while. The vast Wyoming sky stretched above them, stars scattered like diamond dust. It's beautiful here, Sophia said softly. Peaceful. I can see why you chose this place to build your life. Nathan nodded. First time I rode through this valley, I knew this was where I belonged. Had to work 3 years on other people's ranches to save enough for the down payment on the land, but it was worth every callus and sunburn. You built something remarkable. You should be proud. I am, Nathan admitted. Though sometimes I wonder what Elizabeth would think of what I've done with the place since she's been gone. Sophia turned to look at him, her face silvered by moonlight. Tell me about her. Nathan hesitated. He rarely spoke of Elizabeth, even to Caroline. The memories were precious but painful. Yet sitting here with Sophia, the words came more easily than expected. She was strong. Had to be, to follow me out here with not much more than faith that I could make this work. She was educated, taught school back east before we married. Brought books with her instead of fancy dresses, said knowledge would serve her better on the frontier. He smiled at the memory. She taught Caroline to read before she was 5, planted a garden that was the envy of every ranch wife for 50 miles. She sounds wonderful. She was. Used to say that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice you made every day, to be kind, to forgive, to put someone else's needs before your own. Nathan turned to look at Sophia. I didn't always understand what she meant by that. I think I'm starting to now. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a possibility. Sophia was the first to look away, but her hand found his on the bench between them, fingers lightly touching his. "We should both get some sleep," she said, though she made no move to rise. "Tomorrow will come early." "It always does," Nathan agreed, equally reluctant to end the moment. Finally, Sophia stood. "Good night, Nathan, and thank you for everything." He watched her disappear into the house, the gentle click of her bedroom door closing carrying clearly in the night air. Nathan remained on the porch a while longer, his thoughts more tumultuous than before. The peaceful routine they'd established over the past week continued for several more days, though now there was a new awareness between them, glances that lingered, hands that brushed accidentally while passing tools or dishes, conversations that stretched late into the evening. Nathan found himself making excuses to be near the house more often, and Sophia seemed to find reasons to come to the barn or corrals when he was working there. Emmett and Javier exchanged knowing looks, but kept their comments to themselves, at least when Nathan was within earshot. The ranch had taken on a different atmosphere with Sophia's presence lighter, more hopeful. It was Emmett who brought the first warning. He'd ridden into town for mail and supplies, returning with a grave expression that put Nathan immediately on alert. "Hollister's men are in Cottonwood Springs," Emmett reported, dismounting outside the barn where Nathan was repairing a saddle. "4 of them, asking questions about a woman matching Miss Sophia's description." Nathan's hands stilled on the leather. "They say what they want with her. Just that she's wanted for theft and attempted murder. They're offering $50 for information." Emmett removed his hat, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Sheriff Miller's keeping an eye on them, but he can't stop them from asking around, anyone pointing them our way." "Not that I heard, but town's small. Won't take long for someone to remember you've got a woman staying here." Nathan nodded, mind already calculating their options. "Go find Javier. Tell him to saddle up. We need to move the herd to the north pasture, away from the main road." "You think they'll come here?" Emmett asked. "I think we need to be ready if they do." Nathan stood, setting aside the saddle. "And Emmett, not a word to Miss Sophia yet. No need to worry her until we know more." But Sophia was no fool. When Nathan entered the house, she took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked, setting down the shirt she'd been mending. Nathan saw no point in lying. "Hollister's men are in town. It's possible they'll hear about you being here." She paled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I should leave tonight. I never meant to bring this trouble to you." "And go where?" Nathan countered. "No, running now is exactly what they want. You'd be alone, exposed. Here, at least we have shelter, supplies, and men who know how to shoot." "I can't ask you and your men to risk your lives for me." "You didn't ask. I'm offering." Nathan moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Sophia, I don't know exactly what's happening between us, but I know I'm not ready to see you ride away." Her eyes widened at his directness. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. Nathan, whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the sound of hooves approaching at speed. Nathan moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "It's Sheriff Miller." They met the sheriff on the porch as he reined his horse to a stop in the yard. Tom Miller's normally composed features were tight with urgency. "Nathan, Miss Wilson." He tipped his hat to Sophia. "Afraid I've got bad news. Hollister himself just rode into town with a dozen men. They're saying they're coming out here to arrest Miss Wilson for murder." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. "Murder? But that's not I didn't. The man you allegedly shot died of his wounds yesterday," Sheriff Miller explained grimly. "They've got a warrant signed by Judge Preston over in Fort Laramie." Nathan's jaw clenched. Preston was known to be in the pocket of the railroad companies. "That warrant wouldn't stand up in an honest court." "Maybe not, but they don't need it to hold up for long." Miller dismounted, tying his horse to the porch rail. "They'll be here within the hour. I rode ahead to warn you." "Why?" Sophia asked. "You're the law. Shouldn't you be helping them?" Miller's weathered face softened slightly. "Madam, I've known Ben Hollister for 15 years. If he's after you this badly, my guess is you know something he doesn't want getting out. I'm sworn to uphold the law, not help criminals hide behind badges they bought." "What are our options, Tom?" Nathan asked. "Not many," the sheriff admitted. They've got the warrant, which means legally they can take her. I can try to insist she be brought to my jail instead of taken directly to Fort Laramie, but I can't guarantee Hollister will agree. And if we refuse to hand her over, Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. Miller gave him a hard look. Then you'd be obstructing justice, at least on paper. I couldn't protect you from that. I understand, the sheriff sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, the territorial marshal is due in Cottonwood Springs in 3 days. He's not in Hollister's pocket. If you could keep Miss Wilson safe until then, I could arrange for her to tell her story directly to him. Hope flickered in Sophia's eyes. You do that. Like I said, I'm sworn to uphold the law, the real law. Miller straightened his hat. But I can't be seen helping you directly. Hollister has too much influence. We appreciate the warning, Tom, Nathan said, extending his hand. The sheriff shook it firmly. I'll try to slow them down, but they'll be here soon. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. He mounted his horse and tipped his hat once more before riding off. As soon as Miller was out of sight, Nathan turned to Sophia. Pack whatever you can carry. We need to move now. Where are we going? She asked, already heading into the house. There's an old line shack up in the high country, remote, defensible. We can hold out there until the marshal arrives. Nathan followed her inside, grabbing his rifle and ammunition. Hurry, we've got maybe 30 minutes. While Sophia gathered her few belongings, Nathan found Emmett and Javier at the corrals, quickly explaining the situation. I need you both to stay here, he told them. When Hollister arrives, tell him Miss Wilson left days ago, heading west. Make it convincing. Boss, we should come with you, Javier protested. 12 men is too many to face alone. If we're all gone, they'll know we're lying, Nathan countered. This way they might believe she's already fled. With luck, they'll split up to search, giving us more time. Emmett nodded reluctantly. How long should we expect you to be gone? 3 days, maybe 4, if we're not back in a week. Nathan paused. Ride to Cheyenne and tell my daughter what happened. The gravity of the situation settled over them. Both men nodded solemnly. We'll be ready when you get back, Emmett promised. Nathan clapped both men on the shoulder, grateful for their loyalty. Take care of the place and yourselves. Within 20 minutes, Nathan and Sophia were mounted and ready to depart. They took the 2 fastest horses on the ranch Thunder for Nathan and a fleet-footed mare named Starlight for Sophia. Saddlebags were packed with food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Stay close, Nathan instructed as they prepared to ride out. We'll take the creek bed north for a few miles to mask our tracks, then cut east into the foothills. Sophia nodded, her face set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. Nathan, if anything happens to you because of me, nothing's going to happen, he interrupted firmly. We're going to reach that line shack, and in 3 days you'll tell your story to the marshal. After that, Hollister will be the one running. She didn't look convinced, but there was no more time for reassurances. In the distance, a cloud of dust signaled riders approaching from the direction of town. They're coming, Sophia said, her voice tight. Then we ride. Now. Nathan kicked Thunder into motion, leading the way toward the creek that bordered the eastern edge of his property. They pushed the horses hard for the first hour, staying in the shallow water of the creek to hide their trail. Nathan kept a watchful eye on their back trail, but there was no sign of pursuit yet. Perhaps his ruse had worked, and Hollister's men believed Sophia had already fled west. As they reached the foothills, the terrain grew more challenging. Rocky outcroppings and stands of pine trees provided cover, but slowed their pace. Nathan led them on a winding path, occasionally doubling back or crossing exposed ridges only to disappear into dense forest on the other side, tactics designed to confuse any trackers. Sophia proved to be an excellent rider, keeping up with Nathan without complaint despite the grueling pace and difficult terrain. Her face was streaked with dust and sweat, but her eyes remained alert and determined. By late afternoon, they had climbed high enough to look back over the valley. Nathan reined in at a vantage point, scanning the landscape below with his field glasses. What he saw made his blood run cold. They've split up, he reported, focusing on the distant figures. Looks like 4 riders heading west as we hoped, but at least 6 are following the creek. They've picked up our trail. Sophia moved her horse alongside his. How much farther to this lined shack? Another 2 hours, maybe 3 at this pace. Nathan collapsed the field glasses, stowing them in his saddlebag. We need to keep moving. The good news is they're still a good distance behind, and the terrain gets rougher from here. They'll have to slow down, especially as darkness falls. They pushed on, climbing higher into the mountains as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The horses were tiring, forced to navigate increasingly steep and rocky paths. Nathan knew they couldn't maintain this pace much longer without risking injury to the animals. As twilight deepened into dusk, he finally called a halt in a small clearing beside a mountain stream. We'll rest the horses for 30 minutes, then push on. They dismounted, leading the horses to drink while Nathan assessed their situation. The pursuers would likely make camp soon. Riding these mountain trails in darkness was too dangerous unless you knew them intimately, as Nathan did. Sophia splashed water on her face, then sank down on a rock beside the stream. Will we reach this shack before dark? It'll be close, Nathan admitted, checking Thunder's hooves for stones. But I've made this ride in darkness before. We'll make it, she nodded, trusting his judgment. I'm sorry for all this, Nathan. Your life was peaceful before I arrived. Peaceful isn't the same as happy, he replied, meeting her gaze. I didn't realize how empty things had become until you came along. A flush rose to her cheeks, visible even in the fading light. You've been alone a long time. 5 years, he confirmed. Never thought I'd feel this way again. The admission surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sounds the gurgling of the stream and the soft nickering of the horses. Then Sophia stood, crossing the small distance between them. I never expected to find someone like you, she said softly. Someone who would believe me, protect me without asking for anything in return. Nathan reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. I wouldn't say I haven't asked for anything, just haven't said it out loud yet. Their eyes held, the moment suspended between them. Slowly, Nathan leaned forward, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she closed the remaining distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with unexpected urgency. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing harder. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, savoring the moment. We should go, Sophia whispered, though she made no move to step away. We should, he agreed, equally reluctant. The sound of a distant gunshot shattered the moment. Both froze, listening intently. Another shot followed, then a third. That's not good, Nathan muttered, immediately moving to check the horses. They're shooting to signal each other. Someone's spotted our trail. They mounted quickly, all thoughts of rest forgotten. Nathan led them up a steep, narrow trail that wound through dense pine forest. The darkness made the going treacherous, but he knew these mountains like the back of his hand, having hunted them for years. After another hour of hard riding, with the moon now rising to provide some light, Nathan finally spotted what they'd been seeking, a small, sturdy cabin nestled against a cliff face, nearly invisible among the surrounding pines. There it is, he said, relief evident in his voice. The lined shack. They approached cautiously, though Nathan was certain no one would be there. The cabin had been built decades ago by the first ranchers in the area, a shelter for cowboys working the high summer pastures. Now it served primarily as a hunting cabin for Nathan and occasionally as a storehouse for equipment. The interior was simple but solid, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. A small window on each wall provided light and visibility in all directions. Nathan lit a lantern while Sophia tended to the horses, securing them in the lean-to attached to the rear of the cabin. By the time she came inside, he had a small fire going in the fireplace. It's not much, he said, gesturing around the sparse cabin, but it's defensible. Only one door, windows too small for a man to climb through, and clear sightlines in all directions. Sophia moved to the fireplace, warming her hands. How long do you think we have before they find us? If we're lucky, not until morning. These mountains are a maze of trails and ravines. Without knowing exactly where to look, they could search for days. Nathan checked his rifle, then set it by the door, but we should assume they'll find us eventually. Hollister doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily. No, Sophia agreed grimly. He isn't. They ate a simple meal of jerky, dried apples, and hardtack from the cabin's stores, washing it down with fresh water from the stream that ran nearby. The physical and emotional strain of the day was evident in their tired movements and occasional yawns. You should take the bed, Nathan said as they finished eating. I'll keep watch. Sophia looked at the narrow cot, then back at Nathan. We both need rest. We can take turns watching. I'll wake you in a few hours, he promised, though he had no intention of doing so. He needed her rested and alert for whatever tomorrow might bring. She seemed to sense his deception, but was too exhausted to argue. After removing her boots, she lay down on the bed, pulling a worn wool blanket over herself. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Nathan settled into a chair positioned to watch both the door and the surrounding area through the windows. The night was quiet except for the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of wind through the pines. Despite his intention to remain vigilant, the events of the day and the warmth of the fire eventually took their toll. His eyes grew heavy, his head nodding forward. He jerked awake sometime later, instantly alert. Something had disturbed his sleep, a sound that didn't belong. Nathan reached for his rifle, moving silently to the window facing east, where the first hint of dawn was lightening the sky. At first he saw nothing unusual in the gray pre-dawn light. Then a movement caught his eye, a flash of color among the trees about 100 yards from the cabin. A man on horseback, moving cautiously. Nathan's jaw tightened. They'd been found sooner than he'd hoped. He moved to the bed, gently shaking Sophia awake. They're here, he whispered as her eyes flew open. At least one rider to the east, there will be others. She sat up immediately, fully alert despite the early hour. What do we do? Get dressed and ready to move if we have to. Nathan checked his revolver, ensuring it was fully loaded. I'm going to try to get a better look at what we're facing. Using the pre-dawn shadows for cover, Nathan slipped out the back door of the cabin and made his way to a rocky outcropping that offered a better vantage point. What he saw confirmed his fears. Not one rider, but 5, spread out in a rough semicircle to the east and south of the cabin. They were moving slowly, carefully, obviously aware their quarry might be nearby. When Nathan returned to the cabin, he found Sophia dressed and armed with his spare revolver. I can shoot, she said, seeing his glance at the weapon. My husband taught me. Nathan nodded, respecting her capability. There are 5 of them that I can see, probably more coming. They're still searching, haven't spotted the cabin yet. Could we slip past them, try to reach town? Too risky in daylight, Nathan assessed. Our best bet is to stay here. This position is defensible, and if we can hold out until nightfall, we might be able to slip away under cover of darkness. Sophia's face was pale but determined. How long until the marshal reaches Cottonwood Springs? Sheriff Miller said 3 days. This is day 1. Nathan moved to the window, keeping low. If we can evade Hollister until tomorrow night, we could try to make it back to town by the following morning. And if we can't, Nathan met her gaze steadily, then we fight. They didn't have to wait long for Hollister's men to discover their hideout. As the sun rose fully above the horizon, a shout from one of the searchers indicated he'd spotted the cabin. Within minutes, the 5 riders Nathan had seen had regrouped and were approaching cautiously, using the trees for cover. Reed, a voice called out. We know you're in there with the Wilson woman. Come out peaceful-like and nobody needs to get hurt. Nathan and Sophia exchanged glances, positioned on either side of the cabin's windows. That's Benjamin Hollister himself, Sophia whispered, recognizing the voice. Nathan raised his voice to be heard outside. We're not coming out, Hollister. The woman stays with me. There was a pause, then Hollister called back. Don't be a fool, Reed. I've got a legal warrant for her arrest. You're just making things worse for yourself. Legal warrant signed by a corrupt judge, Nathan countered. We'll take our chances with the territorial marshal. A different voice spoke up then, younger, angrier. "The bitch killed my brother. Send her out or we'll burn that cabin down around you." Sophia flinched at the hatred in the voice. "That's Calvin Moss," she whispered to Nathan. "His brother was the one who caught me with the documents." "The one who died." "Nobody's burning anything," Nathan said firmly, though he knew the threat was real. The timber of the cabin was old and dry. It would catch quickly if they tried. For several tense minutes, silence reigned. Nathan used the time to assess their options, which were dwindling rapidly. They had food and water for a few days, but ammunition was limited. His rifle, 2 revolvers, and perhaps 40 rounds between them. The standoff was broken by the sound of more horses approaching from the west, the direction of Nathan's ranch. His heart sank as he counted at least 6 more riders joining Hollister's group. "Looks like they brought reinforcements," he muttered. Hollister's voice rang out again, more confident now. "Reed, I've got 11 men out here all armed. You can't win this fight. Send the woman out now and I'll let you walk away." "He's lying," Sophia said quietly. "He can't leave witnesses now." Nathan nodded grimly. "I know." Raising his voice again, he called back, "Not happening, Hollister. The lady stays with me. We'll wait for the marshal." The response was a rifle shot that splintered the window frame inches from Nathan's head. He ducked back as more shots followed, peppering the front of the cabin. "Get down," he shouted to Sophia, who had already dropped to the floor. The initial volley lasted less than a minute, but made their situation clear. Hollister wasn't interested in negotiating. Nathan risked a quick look through the damaged window and saw the men spreading out, seeking better firing positions around the cabin. "They're surrounding us," he reported, moving to check the rear window. 4 men moving around back. Sophia crawled to the opposite window, revolver ready. "What's the plan?" "Conservative shooting. Make every bullet count." Nathan positioned himself where he could cover the approach to the front door and pray for a miracle. The next few hours passed in a tense stalemate. Occasional shots were fired at the cabin, but Hollister's men seemed content to wait them out, knowing they had the advantage of numbers and supplies. By midday, the sun was directly overhead, turning the interior of the cabin into an oven. Nathan and Sophia took turns watching and resting, sharing the last of their water and rationing the remaining food. They spoke little, both acutely aware of their precarious situation. It was during one of these quiet moments that Sophia reached for Nathan's hand. "If we don't make it through this," she said softly, "I want you to know that meeting you has been the one bright spot in years of darkness. You made me remember what it feels like to hope again." Nathan tightened his grip on her hand. "We're going to make it, Sophia. I didn't find you just to lose you." A small smile touched her lips. "Is that what happened? You found me?" "Feels that way," he admitted. "Like you were an answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was saying." The tenderness of the moment was shattered by a renewed barrage of gunfire, more intense than before. Nathan pushed Sophia down, covering her body with his as bullets splintered the wooden walls and shattered the remaining window glass. When the firing paused, Nathan risked raising his head to assess the damage. The cabin had held, but barely. Several bullets had penetrated the thin walls and the door was hanging precariously on its hinges. "They're getting bolder," he observed grimly. A voice called out, closer than before. "That was just a taste, Reed. Next time we won't be aiming high. Send her out now." Nathan's response was a carefully aimed shot that kicked up dirt at the feet of the man who had spoken, sending him scrambling for cover. "That's my answer," Nathan shouted. The act of defiance bought them another hour of relative quiet, but Nathan knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Hollister's men were tightening the noose, moving closer to the cabin under the cover provided by the surrounding trees and rocks. By late afternoon, their situation had grown desperate. Nathan was down to his last few rifle rounds, and Sophia's revolver had only 3 bullets remaining. The heat inside the cabin was stifling, and their water was nearly gone. "They're going to rush us soon," Nathan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Before dark." Sophia nodded, her face streaked with dirt and grime, but her eyes still determined. "We can't hold them off if they all come at once." "No," Nathan agreed, "but there might be another way out." He moved to the center of the cabin's floor, kneeling to pull aside the worn rug that covered it. Beneath was a trapdoor so well concealed that even Sophia hadn't noticed it. "What's that?" she asked, moving closer. "Emergency exit. The original builder was paranoid about Indian attacks." Nathan worked his fingers into the edge of the trapdoor, lifting it to reveal a narrow passage below. It leads to a small cave about 50 yards down the slope. From there, there's a trail that connects to the main path eventually. Hope flared in Sophia's eyes. "We could escape while they're focused on the cabin." "It's risky," Nathan cautioned. "The passage is old, might have collapsed in places, and once they realize we're gone, they'll come after us hard." "It's better than waiting to be killed or captured," Sophia argued. Nathan couldn't disagree. "All right, you go first. I'll cover our tracks and follow." Sophia hesitated. "Together, Nathan. We go together or not at all." Before he could respond, a new sound reached them, horses approaching at speed from the east, accompanied by shouts of alarm from Hollister's men. Nathan rushed to the window, careful to stay low. What he saw made his heart leap. Sheriff Tom Miller leading at least a dozen armed riders toward the cabin. Among them, Nathan recognized several of his neighbors and friends from Cottonwood Springs. "It's the sheriff," he exclaimed. "And he's brought help." Sophia joined him at the window, her expression shifting from despair to cautious hope as she watched the newcomers engage with Hollister's men. The odds had suddenly, unexpectedly shifted in their favor. How did he know? She wondered aloud. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he recognized two more riders among Miller's group, Emmett and Javier. "My men. They must have gone for help after Hollister left the ranch." The firefight outside was brief but intense. Hollister's men, caught by surprise and outnumbered, quickly surrendered or fled into the surrounding forest. Within minutes, Sheriff Miller was approaching the cabin, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. "Nathan, Miss Wilson, it's safe to come out now." Nathan opened the damaged door cautiously, rifle still ready. The scene outside was one of controlled chaos, several of Hollister's men sitting on the ground, hands bound, while others lay wounded being tended to by Miller's deputies. Of Hollister himself, there was no sign. "Tom," Nathan acknowledged, lowering his weapon as Sophia joined him in the doorway. "Your timing is impeccable." The sheriff removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thank your ranch hands. They rode into town last night, said Hollister had come to your place looking for trouble. I rounded up every man I could trust and set out at first light." "We're grateful," Sophia said sincerely. "But where's Hollister?" Miller's expression darkened. "Slipped away in the confusion, along with that hothead Moss and a couple others. We'll find them, though. Territory's not big enough for them to hide for long." Emmett and Javier approached, both looking relieved to see their boss alive and unharmed. "Sorry we didn't stay put like you asked, boss," Emmett said, not sounding sorry at all. "But when 20 men showed up instead of the dozen the sheriff warned about, we figured the plan had changed." "You did right," Nathan assured them, clapping each man on the shoulder. "Probably saved our lives." As the sheriff organized his men to transport the prisoners and wounded back to town, Nathan led Sophia to a quiet spot away from the activity. "What happens now?" she asked, the exhaustion of their ordeal finally showing on her face. "Now," Nathan said, taking her hands in his, "we go back to town. You tell your story to the sheriff and in 2 days to the marshal. With their testimony and yours, Hollister will be finished. And after that," uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "I've been running so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place." Nathan's voice softened. "Stay with me, Sophia, at the ranch, not as my cook or my help, but as—" He hesitated, suddenly unsure of himself. "As what, Nathan?" she prompted gently. "As whatever you want to be," he finished honestly. "My friend, my partner, my wife someday if that's what you want too. All I know is that having you in my life these past weeks has made me happier than I've been in years. You've given me back something I thought was gone forever." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Hope," she whispered. "Hope," he agreed, drawing her closer. "And a reason to look forward to tomorrow again." Their kiss was witnessed by the setting sun, casting long shadows across the mountain clearing that had nearly been their last stand. But now, instead of an ending, it felt like a beginning. The ride back to Cottonwood Springs was uneventful, with Sheriff Miller's posse providing protection for the entire journey. Sophia rode beside Nathan, their hands occasionally reaching for each other as if to confirm this wasn't a dream, that they had survived and were together. In town, Sophia gave her statement to Sheriff Miller, providing details about Hollister's criminal activities that corroborated evidence the sheriff had already been gathering. By the time the territorial marshal arrived 2 days later, a comprehensive case against Benjamin Hollister had been assembled. "He won't escape justice this time," Marshal James Harrington assured Sophia after hearing her testimony. "We've suspected Hollister of corruption and worse for years, but never had enough evidence or witnesses willing to testify. Your courage changes everything." "What about the men who escaped?" Nathan asked. The fact that Hollister and Calvin Moss were still at large had kept him vigilant, insisting Sophia stay at the sheriff's office rather than return to the ranch until the situation was resolved. "I've got men searching every settlement and trail in the territory," the marshal replied. "They can't have gone far without supplies. It's only a matter of time." He was right. 3 days later, word came that Hollister and Moss had been captured trying to cross into Colorado territory. They would be returned to Wyoming to face justice for their crimes, including the murder of William Wilson and countless acts of corruption and violence. When Nathan told Sophia the news, the relief that washed over her face was profound. For the first time since he'd known her, she wept openly, years of fear and grief finally finding release in his arms. "It's over," she kept saying, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "It's really over." "Yes," Nathan affirmed, holding her close. "Now you can start living again instead of just surviving." The journey back to Broken Arrow Ranch felt different than their departure, no longer fugitives, but people returning home. As they crested the final hill and the ranch buildings came into view, Nathan felt a swell of emotion. This land had always been his dream, his accomplishment. Now, for the first time, it truly felt like home again. Emmett and Javier had prepared for their return, ensuring the house was clean and stocked with fresh supplies. A special surprise awaited them in the barn. A new foal had been born during their absence, a spirited little filly with a white star on her forehead. "She's beautiful," Sophia breathed, watching the wobbly-legged creature nurse from its mother. "What will you name her?" Nathan looked at Sophia, at the joy lighting her face, and knew there was only one possible answer. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope." The weeks that followed were filled with work and healing. Sophia threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning whatever Nathan and his men were willing to teach her. Her natural affinity with horses proved valuable as they prepared for the fall roundup. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing, their pasts, their dreams, the future they might build together. Word of Hollister's arrest and the charges against him spread throughout the territory. Other victims of his crimes came forward, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The railroad company, eager to distance itself from the scandal, offered Sophia a settlement for her husband's wrongful death money. She initially refused, but eventually accepted at Nathan's urging. "William would want you to use it to build a new life," he told her, "to be secure." With the settlement, Sophia became a partner in Broken Arrow Ranch, investing in new breeding stock and improvements to the property. The partnership extended beyond business, growing deeper and more personal with each passing day. It was on a crisp October evening, with the aspen trees turned to gold and the first hint of winter in the air, that Nathan finally asked the question that had been on his mind for months. They had ridden to the highest point on the ranch, a ridge overlooking the entire valley. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and purple, the ranch buildings tiny in the distance. "I brought Elizabeth up here when I first bought this land," Nathan said, dismounting and helping Sophia down from her horse. "Told her all my dreams for what it could become. Sophia took his hand, sensing the importance of the moment. She would be proud of what you've built. What we're building now, he corrected gently. Sophia, when you came into my life, everyone in town said you were trouble, but from the moment I saw you, something inside me knew different. He took both her hands in his. You were the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was saying. This ranch was just land and buildings until you came along. You've made it a home again. Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes as she realized where this was leading. I love you, Nathan continued, his voice rough with emotion. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me. Sophia Wilson, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, Nathan Reed, I will marry you. Their kiss sealed the promise as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above. They were married in Cottonwood Springs on Christmas Eve, 1878, in a ceremony attended by the entire community. Sheriff Miller gave the bride away, and Emmett served as Nathan's best man. Caroline returned from Cheyenne with her husband and their new baby, completing the family circle. As they exchanged vows in the small church, decorated with pine boughs and candles for the holiday, Nathan looked into Sophia's eyes and saw not just the woman he loved, but the future they would build together, a future neither had dared hope for before finding each other. The reception was held at the town hall, with music and dancing lasting well into the night. When it was time for the traditional first dance, Nathan took Sophia in his arms, remembering how he'd once thought he would never dance again after Elizabeth died. Happy? He asked softly as they moved across the floor. Sophia's smile was answer enough, but she spoke anyway. More than I ever thought possible. You saved me, Nathan. No, he corrected, drawing her closer. We saved each other. As winter turned to spring and spring to summer, the Broken Arrow Ranch thrived under their joint care. Sophia's business acumen complemented Nathan's practical ranching knowledge, creating a partnership that benefited them both. The settlement from the railroad allowed them to expand their operations, purchasing additional grazing land and improving their breeding stock. By the fall of 1879, Sophia had news that brought their happiness full circle. Nathan, she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, I have something to tell you. He turned to her, noting the special glow about her that had been present for several days. What is it? Sophia took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. We're going to have a baby, in the spring. The joy that flooded through Nathan was unlike anything he'd experienced before. He gathered Sophia into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, which to him she was. A baby, he repeated, voice thick with emotion. Our baby, are you happy? She asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. Happier than I have words to express, Nathan assured her. When I lost Elizabeth and thought my life was over, I never imagined I could feel this kind of joy again. You've given me back everything I lost, Sophia, and so much more. And you've given me a home, a family, a future, she replied, tears of happiness in her eyes. Things I thought were forever beyond my reach after William and James died. They sat together as darkness fell, planning and dreaming for the child that would join their family in the spring, a new life born of love that had emerged from the ashes of loss and pain. In April 1880, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named William Nathan Reed, honoring both the husband she had lost and the one who had helped her find happiness again. The birth was straightforward, with the town's midwife attending, and Nathan pacing anxiously outside the bedroom until the baby's first cry rang out. When he was finally allowed to enter, the sight of Sophia cradling their son moved him to tears. She looked up at him with exhausted radiance, offering the tiny bundle for his inspection. He's perfect, Nathan whispered, carefully taking his son into his arms for the first time. The baby's face was red and wrinkled, a tuft of dark hair visible beneath the blanket, just like his mother. I think he has your chin, Sophia observed with a tired smile, and hopefully your patience. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, cradling the baby in one arm while his other hand sought Sophia's. Thank you, he said simply, the words inadequate for the depth of his gratitude. For what? For this, for everything. He looked from his wife to his newborn son and back again, for riding into my life that day and turning it upside down in the best possible way. Sophia squeezed his hand. I remember you telling me once that I was the answer to a prayer you didn't know you were saying. I think that works both ways, Nathan. You were the answer to mine as well. As the years passed, the Broken Arrow Ranch continued to prosper under their stewardship. Little William grew into a strong, curious boy with his mother's spirit and his father's steady nature. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Elizabeth Sophia, completing their family circle. Nathan and Sophia faced the challenges of ranching life together: drought years, harsh winters, fluctuating cattle prices, but their partnership remained unshakable. The mutual respect and deep love that had begun in those dangerous days of their first meeting only strengthened with time and shared experiences. By 1885, the Broken Arrow was known throughout the territory as one of the most successful operations in the region. Nathan's innovative breeding programs and Sophia's shrewd business dealings had transformed the modest ranch into a thriving enterprise. They employed a dozen hands year-round now, with more during the busy seasons. Their home had expanded as well, with additions to accommodate their growing family and frequent visitors. Caroline and her family came from Cheyenne several times a year, and the ranch often hosted community gatherings and holiday celebrations. On the 10th anniversary of the day Sophia had ridden into Nathan's life, they took their children to the ridge overlooking the ranch, the same spot where he had proposed years earlier. "This is where your father asked me to marry him," Sophia told 7-year-old William and 5-year-old Elizabeth as they looked out over the valley below. "Was it romantic?" Elizabeth asked, always eager for stories. "Very," Sophia confirmed with a smile at Nathan. "It was the second best day of my life." "What was the first?" William wanted to know. "The day I met your father," she answered without hesitation. "Even though I was in terrible trouble and very afraid, somehow I knew that day would change everything." Nathan put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Your mother rode in with 3 men chasing her, bullets flying. Most folks in town said she was nothing but trouble. But you helped her anyway." William's eyes were wide. "I did," Nathan confirmed. "Best decision I ever made." "Why did you help her if people said she was trouble?" Elizabeth persisted, always the more inquisitive of the two. Nathan looked at Sophia, the love of 10 years evident in his gaze. "Because sometimes what looks like trouble to everyone else is actually the answer to your prayers." Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she leaned into his embrace. "And sometimes," she added softly, for his ears alone, "a prayer you didn't even know you were saying gets the most beautiful answer of all." As the sun began to set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Reed family made their way back down to the ranch that had become not just a successful business, but the heart of a community and the foundation of a love story that had begun with danger and desperation, but blossomed into something enduring and true. The cowboy who had taken in a woman everyone thought was trouble had indeed found the answer to his prayers, not just in the love they shared, but in the family they had created and the life they had built together, one day at a time, from the ashes of their separate sorrows into a joy neither had dared to imagine possible again. And as they rode home together, surrounded by the legacy of their love, both Nathan and Sophia knew with absolute certainty that the greatest adventures of their lives had begun not with the danger that had brought them together, but with the courage to open their wounded hearts and believe that even after unimaginable loss, new love and new life were not just possible, but waiting for those brave enough to reach for them.